Hi, it's Paul Banis with GreatDad.com, and thank you very much for joining either the podcast or the YouTube version of the podcast. I'd really appreciate it if you took just a second to subscribe either on your podcast app or in YouTube. It doesn't really do anything. It's not going to send you any emails. It's just going to show up more often on your feed, and it does me a lot of good in terms of getting more exposure for this work I do to support dads. I'd also like to invite you to come to my page, GreatDad.com/go, if you'd like to discuss more about any of the issues that we are covering within the podcast, especially if there's any way I can help you to be a sounding board in your own struggles to be a dad and to be there for your family. So take a look at that. It also includes a link to my course on gratitude, where at GreatDad.com/gratitude with a offer to take that course for free. So see you in a second. Hey, it's Paul Banis with GreatDad.com here again in my weekly series talking about modern fatherhood, and I've got a great guest today to talk maybe we'll talk most specifically about the teen years, but an overall specialist in parenting. Ed Gerety you're a speaker, an author, and a podcast host specifically about the teen years. But what I love about you too, Ged, is that you've got 200 hours of yoga teaching experience. So welcome, Ed Gerety.
Thanks, Paul. I'm excited to be here and really a pleasure to be on your podcast.
Yeah, I was really intrigued by the yoga thing. I don't know if we're going to get into that, but let's let's talk about modern parenting, because you're a little bit younger than I am, though you have kids about the same age. And do you have just a general feeling about how parenting has evolved in the last 25 years, and see if our conclusions have kind of line up?
Sure. Well, let me give you just a little bit of background too. I grew up with two brothers and a sister, so there was four of us, and my mom and my dad. And we were a very close, tight-knit family growing up. And so a lot of the lessons that I learned about how to be a parent really came from the modeling that I saw my mom and dad do. So I was very fortunate to have some really positive role models as parents myself. And then for the past 3 decades, I've actually been working with middle school, high school, and college students all across the country. And that experience has given me a lot of insights too, in terms of how kids have changed and also how they have not changed.
Yeah.
And then my wife and I, we've been married for 24 years. And we have an 18-year-old now who's a senior in high school, and a 20-year-old that's a sophomore in college. And as you mentioned, I've been doing this podcast called Navigating the Teen Parents Navigating the Teen Years for the past 4 years. So yeah, have kids changed? Absolutely, because the world has changed. But I think there are a couple things that are really consistent across the board that it's more challenging sometimes to do because the world has changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the first is this, that if we are really going to have a strong relationship with our kids, if we're going to raise really and really be connected with our kids, we really need to be present. We need to be present with them because the world is so full of distractions right now that it's very hard for us to really be paying attention fully to them when we're with them. This idea of multitasking, and we've all made that mistake. I can remember my son walking into the kitchen. I'll be on my phone, he'd be on his phone, and I'd be like, "Hey Ryan, how was your day?" And then he'd start talking about his day, and I'm half listening, he's half sharing,
Right.
and we're not really connected, Paul. So I think it's really important to really, you mentioned it in some of your workshops, right? About being intentional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, we talked about just a second before about how we kind of hate those kind of buzzwords, but that word does really sum up, I think, a lot of our common strategies is like going into those situations with your kids and not just saying, he's in the room with me, but like, no, I've got an opportunity here. I've got an opportunity. My child is in the room with me, and rather than getting on my phone, I can use this time.
Yeah, it's turning down the music in the car when you ask
Oh,
how your
great
day was.
example.
It's saying, hey, you know what? Can we just put our phones down for a second and can we have a conversation here? And then when we make the mistake of we're not listening and we're not actively listening, to actually say, hey, you know what? I'm sorry, but I really wasn't giving you my
Yeah.
attention right there. And then let's come back from that. And so when you're really present with your kid, one of the things that I've learned and I've discovered, and many experts have shared with me, is that when you're really present with your kid, you can listen without judgment. You're allowing that open communication, because just like all of us, everyone wants to feel valued and they want to feel heard.
Yeah.
And I think the only way that we can make our kids feel valued and heard is that it starts with us being present, being with them right there, right now.
Yeah, well, like, yeah, and that goes with for everybody, including your partner too. It's hard. I'm interested in this because when you said it, it's kind of light bulb went off with me in terms of the fact that we sometimes think like the family's breaking down and that it's harder to feel like everybody's together. And I don't know if that's actually true or whether that's our kind of our gauzy-eyed view of the past. But there is something definitely going on with the fact that the family used to come home and they'd be stuck in maybe the living room, whatever. They only had three channels of TV if they were lucky. I had one growing up. And there wasn't a lot more to do. You'd play cards or you'd do something else to pass the time. And even if you weren't like intentional, you didn't have a lot of choice. That was your main source of entertainment. And now we have all these distractions. So it puts us even higher burden on us to really do this parenting thing responsibly.
Yeah, I think that idea of everyone comes home and we have dinner at 5:30 and then
Yeah.
it's a Sunday meal. That looks good in the movies and for some families that does work, but for most families they don't have such a set schedule. So with that schedule not being set though, I also think it's really important that you have some traditions and rituals that are really structured, that are consistent all the way through, so that there's something to look forward to. So maybe it's not a Sunday dinner every Sunday, but maybe it's a Sunday breakfast once a month where we're all getting together as the family and we're really celebrating that. Really just taking the time to create some structures and rituals of like, this is this is what we're celebrating, this is what we're acknowledging on that.
That's so funny because when I was like in high school or maybe even college, I was very cynical about all the putting up the decorations for Halloween. Then you get the turkey on the wall and for Thanksgiving and all this. But that plays an incredible role in how we have the human experience that bonds us all together. We're all looking for those touch points to kind of keep us together and make sure that we're together as a culture or as a family. And a lot of that gets lost unless you actually do it.
You
A lot of
absolutely.
people get lazy and they just don't they don't bother putting up a tree or whatever the thing is in their experience, and they miss out on that common thread.
And that's such a great point too, Paul, because like when our son came home from college, during winter break, one of the first things he noticed was, are we going to be are we having that special Christmas dinner?
Yeah,
So looking forward to seeing the house decorated. And now as the kids get older, they look back and they say, when are we doing that next thing that we always do as a family? When are we
right.
having that beach day? When are we going to that game? When are we going to that concert? Really creating those moments. One of the things also too I've noticed, Paul, in terms of working with teens and talking with parents, and we discovered with our own kids too, and that's really how we wanted to raise them, was for them to really be curious. To
Hmm.
really be curious, and how important it is to like expose them to so many different things. Sometimes I think we get linear as parents and we say, okay, I'm putting my kid down the sport track, or I'm
Right.
putting my
Oh
kid
yeah.
down the art track or the music track. And we don't give them an opportunity to really be exposed to a lot of different things. We were, to use that word again, we were very intentional about, saying, okay, giving them instruments when they were little, and then and taking them to different events, concerts, movies, play, theater, sports, all of that, to kind of see what would they get attracted to, what they kind of got interested in. And so, like for our son, he tried a lot of different things, from music to even to dance to karate, martial arts. And then he picked the sports track. Our daughter was playing sports all the way up until middle school, and then totally went a different direction and fell in love with performing arts. So one of the things I noticed since COVID is that there's not as much curiosity happening.
Mm.
So kids are kind of playing it safe. And as parents, we kind of want our kids to be playing it safe too, because it really scared a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And for good reason. But so now when I'm working with kids, sometimes like, do steps 1, 2, and 3, and they'll do steps 1, 2, and 3, and that's it. They'll stop. Then I was like, well, you could have gone a little bit further. You could have done a little bit more. Well, you didn't ask me to. You didn't ask me to.
Hmm.
So I just think that it's really important with our kids, no matter what their age, is to continue to encourage them to be curious and to step outside of their comfort zone and to try new things. Oftentimes we hear this comment about, go follow your passion. Well, it's not passion first. It's actually,
Right. Yeah, yeah. You got to discover what that is. Yeah.
yeah, it's curiosity first.
Yeah.
So we encourage them to take those positive risks and to step outside of their comfort zone and to try new things. I think that's how they learn and they grow and they can, and we help them to be, positive, healthy, responsible human beings.
How do people develop the motivation to do that? I was lucky enough to have a spouse who's she and I share a lot of common interests, but she also pushed our kids to do things that maybe I wouldn't have had them do. She like a 6-week drawing course at the museum where I had to get up, get up every Saturday morning and take them over there at 9 in the morning for the 2-hour class or whatever. But there were a lot of things like that I had them doing other things and she had other things, and therefore we pushed them kind of unconsciously into a whole array of things just because we had different ideas. But I'm sure this is hard for a lot of parents, is to find the resources now that a lot of those things don't exist anymore in schools, art classes, music, all the stuff that there used to be. You really have to go out and do the research and find those opportunities for yourself, for your kids.
Yeah, and it also goes back again. If you're paying attention, if you are really present with your kids, you'll see what they're listening to. You'll
Yeah.
see what they're watching. You'll see what activities they're engaging in. And when you see them gravitate towards a certain activity, then you feed that fire. You feed that fire because you don't know what direction it's going to go, where that will take them.
Yeah.
Um, I think that leads to another really important point too, Paul, is that is, you know, sometimes we get so focused on the result. We are such goal driven, and we want our kids to be the best, to be the best, to be the best, to achieve and succeed, that we get so focused on the result that we forget that it's not just about the result, it's about the effort. And if we can teach our kids and remind our teens and remind ourselves that, yeah, the goal is important. It's great to have a big goal. When you achieve a goal, great. But more importantly than the goal itself, the result is the effort. Because if we can teach our kids to really focus on the effort, then a lot of times that takes away the whole struggle that a lot of kids face with trying to be perfect. And it's
Yeah.
even what even adults go through as well, trying to be perfect. I want to be perfect. I don't want to make any mistakes at all.
So
But
what does that look like when you're talking to your kids? Is it as simple as affirmations of, rather than saying, I'm so blown away, you were the star of the play, rather than, wow, you really worked hard for 6 weeks and it really showed, and you know, that I'm celebrating that part of the achievement rather than the end opening day achievement.
sure, like I'll give you an example of like our philosophy around our grades with our kids. We were never focused, and we still aren't. We're not focused on the grade. We're not focused on the GPA. We're focused on the effort. And we tell them that. We've told them that since they were little kids of like, wow, look how hard you worked for that grade in math. Look what you did. Look at the extra effort. Hey, look at the comment the teacher made on the report card about your attitude in class. Look at that. And so you're shining a light on those things that they did to work hard to get to wherever they got. So it's not like, wow, good for you. You won the gold medal. You placed first in that academic competition. No, it's like, wow, look how hard you studied for that. You point that out. Years and years ago, I participated in a program called Strategic Coach out of Canada. And they talked about this and how important it is to celebrate the small wins and the
Mhm.
progress
Yeah.
progress along the way, progress over perfection. And they had a great activity that they had invited us to do, and it's called Positive Focus. And so what you do is, my wife and I, we've been doing this now for over a decade. We literally, once a week, my wife and I will sit down and we'll do a positive focus. And a positive focus is simply this. You write, what were the positive things that happened this week, personally and professionally? And you write those things down. It comes out to about 10, 12, 13, 14 things. There's no set number. And then we share them back and forth with each other. And it's amazing because as we all know as parents and as dads, um, you go through a whole week and you're like, what did you do this week? You did so much, you don't even know what you did. And so
Right.
it really anchors that. And so we did that. We did that with our kids, and I still do that with our kids now as young adults, and saying, so give me some highlights for the week, give me some positive things about the week, so that they're looking at the progress that they made. Just so important I think that's just such an important thing that we can teach our kids and remind our kids about. It's about the effort. It's that favorite quote by Jim Rohn. It's not just about the goal, it's about who you become and what you experience on the way towards that goal. So I think
Yeah, I
that's
love that message of positivity because we all can get involved in that negativity cycle. And what we know now about psychology seems to be indisputable about the fact that positive self-talk, even though it sounds kind of goofy, actually does work. It just does set yourself up. In your podcast, you talk about other things like that. I mean, we talked about traditions and that type of thing. Talked about positive talk. Do you talk about gratitude at all during the teen years, or trying to get them to focus on how much there is in the world to be grateful, even if things aren't necessarily, like it's horrible weather here in San Francisco, but there's still a lot to be
right.
grateful. I can still see the Golden Gate Bridge from my window if I stick my head out far enough.
Well, I think you kind of touched on two things that are they're kind of connected, and that is that self-talk or the positive self-talk, which relates to your attitude. What kind of attitude do you have? And so having that positive attitude, and it's true. It's like, yeah, a lot of people said it's just kind of like made up positivity of like, I feel good about myself, or
Mm-hmm.
day by day I'm getting better and better. But now they've done the studies in neuroscience, they're doing the studies in positive psychology where they can actually demonstrate how the chemicals within your body change when you're using that positive self-talk. What do they say? You have 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day on
Yeah.
average. And the problem is that most of us have the same 60, 70,000 thoughts we had the day before. And oftentimes the majority of those thoughts are not positive, they're negative. And I
Yep.
think and so we teach our kids to be positive, to have a growth mindset, not a toxic positivity, like everything's popcorn and balloons, but they have a choice in their attitude
Right.
in teaching them the power of a growth mindset that they can go farther than they think they can. Um, and that positive self-talk it's so important because I'll give you an example. When I'm working with kids, I'll see a kid make a mistake and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm so dumb," or "Oh man, I'm so
Right.
stupid," or "Oh man, I'm just so lousy at that." And then you can see that negative self-talk, and where are they learning that? And I think sometimes they're learning it right from the people within their family. This summer, I'm golfing with my son, and there's another dad golfing with his son. And from the time we hit the first hole, every time the dad would miss a putt, he'd swear, and then he'd call himself like you jerk, or and it happened every hole. And sure enough, my son, he already knew that we already had the positive self-talk. So he was aware of it too. And we talked about in the golf cart, like, can you believe this guy? He's just ripping himself down. I'm telling you, Paul, by the 11th hole, his son misses a putt, and his son does the same exact thing. He doesn't swear, but says, "Oh, you're so bad. You're so this." And we got back in the car, my son and I were like, "Do you see the power of that, Ryan? Do you see how that just it's you're living into that. It's that negativity." So, and how does that relate to gratitude? Because I think that when you start to have when you have that positive attitude, then you start to gravitate towards what it is you're grateful for, or you start to gravitate to what's the abundance around your life. And it is showing our kids that and demonstrating that, saying, hey, whether it's just taking the time before a meal or taking the time, and it can be a prayer, it can also just be you know what, I'm just so thankful that we're all at this table together here today. I'm
Yeah.
so grateful for this beautiful weather here today. We model it, just like we model our attitude, we model our language. And we also model that fact of like, wow, there's one thing that I realized, my mom and my dad was grateful for every day that he had here, every day. And so you teach that. And I think you teach it by, once again, you can't really be grateful if you're not truly in the present moment. If
Yes.
you start getting
Yeah.
caught up in the past and the future, it's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. It works both ways. If you're grateful, you're in the present moment. If you're present in the moment, you usually can find things to be grateful for.
When
So,
the kids were little, Paul, we used to do a game. We used to do a little game just called the gratitude game. And we would be in the car and we'd go around the car and we'd be like, okay, gratitude game, 2 minutes. All right, we're just gonna go around and say what are we grateful for? And they'd be like, "Oh, Dad, come on, Dad." But then we would do it. And then, we did it when they were like in the third grade. We did it when they were fifth grade. I mean, we did it all the way through. And even now, we go out to dinner sometimes. I'll be like, "Hey, quick, let's do a quick little gratitude game." And then we'll go around and say what we're grateful for. And it's a beautiful, it's another little tradition, another little ritual you can institute.
yeah, some of those things are easier to do. Not to say you can't start them in the teenage years, but I would, if you have younger kids, it's a lot easier to start some of those when they're little and they don't before they can start getting cynical. It's a little bit harder to introduce them when they're 15. You suddenly say, "Wait, what are you grateful for today?" Like,
Yes,
give me a break.
true.
So,
Definitely.
So let's talk about those teenage years, since you do spend a lot of time on your podcast talking to people about that. Because, we talked just a second before we started about how it's really hard to get it right. And it's very different. There's some consistent themes, but it's very hard to know in the moment how to react to all the different things. They love you, they're pulling away from you, they need you, but they tell you to go away. Not to mention the possibility of drugs, sex, alcohol, all the rest of the temptations that are out there that can mess up anybody. Are I don't know what my question here is. Are things changing in that realm? Are there any overall other themes other than what we've talked about in terms of how to address those years?
Well, there's so much more access to information, right? And so much access to knowledge. Now, I mean, you can get onto a site and just you can Google, how do I talk to my teen? And you'll get 35 different answers, right?
Yeah,
I think that's one of the things that I realized, that there's not just one way to parent.
you're right.
There
Right.
isn't. And it's every child is different and unique, and everybody's life is different and unique. So I don't think there's one way. But I do think one of the conditional things is to really, I think it's really important to remind our teens that, hey, as you're going through this, you know what, I'm going through this too, and I don't have it all figured out. I think you can really be open with your teen and kind of say, hey, you know what, I'm trying to learn this too here. I'm trying to figure this out too. And I think that's really important, just to kind of be that vulnerable, to say, hey, and when we make a mistake, when we say something that maybe we shouldn't have said, when we're not present or we're not paying attention, we can say, hey, you know what? I'm sorry, I really made a mistake. And we're teaching our teen that. I think it's also important one of the things I've also discovered in the podcast was we all want our kids to be independent, and we want our kids to be responsible, and we want them to be safe for sure. But I think, how do we teach that independence, and how do we teach that responsibility? So I think it's really important for us, even when our kids are young and even in their teen years, like for example, our daughter Shannon, probably like once every other month, Shannon's in charge of like making a meal from start to finish. She has to go to the store.
Love it.
She pick out the ingredients, and she gets to make it. And when our son was home, they would do it together. And it was just a great activity of like, okay, they had to go to the grocery store, and that's a sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
Even when we're traveling in the airports, when they were in their teenage years, we'd be like, okay, we're lost. We don't know how to get to the gate.
Yeah.
Get us there. What do you mean? And all those opportunities. And if you have the ability, and I know it's an investment, but even a pet teaches that responsibility, that sense of like being responsible for something more than just yourself.
Yeah. How do you keep those things front and center? Because I think that's what we all struggle with. We all want to be good parents, and a lot of us have tried to read books and keep a lot of this stuff top of mind. And listening to you, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm right there. But did I do a lot of that in the moment? Not, not always. And I thought I was pretty focused on trying to do a halfway decent job. But I think a lot of people struggle with this like with all these other distractions. Like in the moment, I'm in the airport, I'm trying to get the gate, we're late, all the rest of it. And now suddenly I've had this idea I should use this opportunity for a life lesson. It's hard for us in this day to be as good as we should be in taking every opportunity.
Without a doubt, especially if you're a single dad. If you're a single dad, then you don't have a partner really to be able to bounce ideas back, or someone to support you and someone to encourage you. So then in that case, I think you have to go out there and find a network of other dads, or a network of your close friends that you can bounce those things off of. So I think one of the ways you keep it front and center is that you have that, if you do have a partner, that you really have that open dialogue with your partner of like, hey, let's make sure that we're still on track here on what really matters. Are we focusing on what really matters? Goes back to the positive focus in a way. Having that communication of like, okay, what are we doing this week? What are we doing this week with the kids? What's going on this week with the kid? What's going on this month with the kids? And then being present to that and saying, okay, yeah, you got to keep it just like going. It's not a one-time thing, I guess would be another way to say it, Paul. It's not one-time thing. It's not just front and center. It's like going to the gym, right? You don't go to the gym. How do you keep the gym front and center? You have the sneakers out, that you're there, and you go after it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's another dad that's been working in the space for a long time. It's long had a dream of an app that kind of reminds you periodically during the day to do some of these basic things for the dad who does need to be reminded, like to tell their kids they love them and some of these things all day long. I don't know what the answer is, but you're right. Is it like how can you trick your mind or give yourself those reminders to take those opportunities, like the sneakers in the hall that says go to the gym today?
Sure. Well, I mean, like even right there, right? Look behind you, right? With all the books that you have, right? That's all that's top of mind because that's all on personal growth and development. So it's right there in front of you. So one of the ways you keep it front and center is well, what's your environment? What's your environment around you? If you're going to keep your family front and center, I mean, as the pictures of the family on the refrigerator, are there pictures of the family around the house? Are there photos of all the certain memories around the house? That's the environment, right?
Right.
So when you see a picture of the kids in the fridge, you're like, wow, there's our kids. We were on vacation. You know what? Wait, when are we going on our next vacation? Or oh, that was when they were at the school when we were at the school play. Okay, great. But your environment plays such a huge role in what you're
Yeah.
focusing. So just the reminders of saying, I have a rock on my desk that says gratitude. So it's just a nice little reminder, hey, gratitude, just being grateful.
Yeah.
So I think that's your environment plays a huge role in terms of who you feel, of how you feel, and also what you're focusing on, because what is it? Where your attention goes is where your energy goes. So kind
Yeah.
of like, what am I surrounding myself with here?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because we're all going to fail at this a bazillion times. It's like going through a test every day, just over and over, every millisecond of how well you model, what you communicate, when you don't blow up, all the values you impart, these traditions, there's a lot of stuff on that list of how you could be the 100% perfect parent at every moment and giving yourself a little bit of grace, but at the same time remembering this is a core function, I guess maybe is how
Yeah,
I
and
end up rationalizing how
sure.
many times I failed.
There's no such thing as a perfect parent, right?
Right.
I mean, no,
That
just like
helps.
there's a perfect human being, right?
Right.
So yeah, we make mistakes and but at the end of the day too, though, Paul, I think the most important thing that we can to teach our kids and give to our kids, especially as dads, is sometimes we get caught in that the masculinity of like strong and tough, but to teach our kids to that the idea of like, hey, teaching them that unconditional love of like, hey, I love you, and you mean the whole world to me. And sometimes maybe we're not able to say that verbally, but then we need to take the time then to write it in a letter. I know sometimes dads have said to me, I don't tell my kids I love them that much, really, but everything I do is for them. I have two jobs. I do that. They know that I love them, and I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough. I think you got to take the time to connect with them and let them know, hey, I love you, and say it verbally. And I think you need to, do it in a way of like in a note or a card, to write, especially from your dad. I received some beautiful letters from my dad when I was in my 20s, and I still have them to this day. And just the words of encouragement, just small little notes like, "Hey, son, just want to let you know I'm proud of you. Keep on doing your best." And I think that goes such a long way because at the end of the day, you just know your parents loved you. Your dad loved you. And if your dad had your back, oh man, I know at the end of the day, my dad loves me and my dad has my back. That's pretty powerful right there.
Yeah, that's a good inspiration for today because they're that little stage for a long time. They're holding on to your pant leg and they unconditionally love you, and it's very easy to grab them up and hold them tight and all that stuff. And then they hit adolescence, and you go through this period when they are in their middle late teens, even into college, where there's almost like this wall that goes up because I know this, my personal experience is that my son and I were super, super close. And now he's off to college and we don't talk as much. And, when he comes home, he's got other things to do. But I don't think there's any shortage of his desire to hear something from my heart saying how much I love him, how much I respect what he's doing, all the positive things that maybe you feel, but that you almost feel like your kid would say, "Oh, that's not cool," or "I don't want to talk about that," or I'm too much in my life to let you in emotionally in that way. but you can't go wrong with that, right? I mean, there's no downside.
I don't think there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I think you make a great point too. As you know, and even in the teenage years, and then as they get into their 20s, there's that balance between, I want my independence, but then I also need your help. I want you. I push myself away, but I want you. But I still need you over here close to me. So it's like I experienced with our son too, where really close with my son, but I also know I had to give him that space. I could not keep that relationship where if I was texting him every day, this was for my relationship. Now, maybe that works for other dads, but for me, I wanted to give my son space so for them to be able to learn and grow and be able to find themselves. And so, I think as a dad, we can ask ourselves, are we giving our kids enough space, especially as they get older, to find themselves? Or are we too much into their lives? Does that make sense? Like we're not giving them an opportunity to kind of be free.
Yeah.
So, and I think I heard a great on one of my podcasts, I forget who shared it with me, but they made a great point that when our kids go into get into their 20s, you're not so much the parent anymore, but you're more of a guide. You're more of the guide, helping them guide. You're more of the like a conciliary kind of like,
Yeah.
you're not telling them what to do. You're rather asking them, how are you? And how do you think you should approach this? What do you think is the best direction? So you're not really, hey, what do you think about this job? Well, what do you think about this job? What do you think the pros are before I start to get into what my opinion is, you know?
Well, those are classic coaching skills that can go throughout the years, is open-ended questions and trying to get to who they are rather than who you want them to be, or thinking of them as a mini me. I think that's a huge trap we can all get in. We all fall into, is that you so much want them to duplicate all of your experiences because they made you whatever positive version of yourself you see,
Sure.
and they don't have another life, and trying to understand what makes them tick that's a big challenge in itself of that through those teen years.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just continuing to give them that space to actually, in a way, to allow them to make mistakes. Our greatest lessons come from the mistakes and from our failures. And I think that sometimes we want to protect our kids so much that we don't quote unquote allow them to fail. And so if we give them opportunities to make certain mistakes, or maybe not do something that they were do something that they weren't supposed to do. What's that? It's that great phrase, it's that's where the kids learn resiliency. That's where they start to learn that perseverance that everyone talks about right now.
Right.
That resilience doesn't come from the easy wins or from the victories. It comes from the setbacks, right? That they turn into great comebacks.
Yeah, well, that certainly is a thing that people are talking about today. Is it isn't even helicopter parenting, but it's the fact that we don't let the kids run out in the backyards and play until the sun sets, or until somebody yells out the door to come on home for dinner or whatever. But it translates into the high school years, where people don't let the kids go out and party or get into trouble. I mean, I did a lot of bad stuff when I was in high school. Not bad stuff, but stuff that I wouldn't allow my kids to do, or I'd be worried, or I would try to prevent the circumstances, the opportunities for them to do those types of things. And now kids don't, by and large, they don't, they're all parents are afraid their kid's going to show up on a milk carton. So we're really worried about the strangers and all these stuff. And are we damaging the kids? Do you think the kids still get an opportunity to have those kind of growth, quasi dangerous situations that they did in past times?
Yeah, I think kids are given opportunities to go. I do think that they're
Not
given
just online.
yeah. No, I do think that they're given opportunities to do that. I think as parents, we need to be mindful of are we allowing them to go out there and to go out into the backyard and get their knees dirty and to fall down and to make some mistakes. So you be mindful of that and you be present to that. The consequences are so much, the stuff that you and I did in high school or in college, we didn't have the other consequence of all that, of making a mistake and then having it be all over social media and having it be all over, whether it's Instagram, whether it's on a Facebook page, or whether it's somewhere else. It's like, or a TikTok video so there's an awesome responsibility too about talking to our kids about, yeah, there's consequences and there's choices, and also teaching them at an early age, and then keep reminding them through. We did that with our kids all growing up, and we'll still remind them about the power of their social media and who they're connected to, who they're following. the conversations they're engaged in, how are they representing themselves. I'll tell you a real quick story, Paul. Our son wanted to play lacrosse in college, and all through middle school, high school, we played in the club teams and we traveled all over. And when it came time for his senior year in high school to start looking at different colleges, we finally came across the university that he wanted to play lacrosse at. And the coach was interested in playing there. And I'm right there in the office with him. And he says to our son, everything looks great, your grades, your transcript, I've seen you play. There's just one more thing we'd like to take a look at. Sure, what's that, coach? He goes, I just need to take a look at your social media. Understand it's private, but we want to make sure that everything's consistent with out here is consistent within here.
Yeah.
And because we'd had that conversation with our son, because I'd had that conversation with our son and our daughter, he was like, hey, no problem, coach. No, let me know whatever you want to see. And now he's playing a sport. He's second year in college at a university that he loves, playing a sport that he loves to play in. So it's another important lesson to keep talking to our kids about, is the power of that social media and then how they're representing themselves on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
The crazy world. I mean, in terms of what you could do, that would be, I mean, back in the day, I mean, I'd say it was bad. I mean, it wasn't really that bad, but there's stuff that could have been embarrassing that could be live forever if caught in social media, caught on
Sure.
yeah. All right. Well, Ed, thank you so much for taking some time with me. You can find Ed's podcast at Parents Navigating the Teen Years. I think I can read my scribbly handwriting. And you also have a new book. I know that's just tangential, but the new book, you can find that at Gerety.com, right?
You got it. Yeah. Shine your light, navigate your way to a life you love.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks again for taking time with me. You can find my coaching offerings at GreatDad.com, including GreatDad.com/go, including a free course on developing that gratitude skill that we talked about, as well as the scientific underpinnings of how valuable this gratitude thing is. It's not just a thing you do just for to keep a smile on your face. Okay, so until next time, stay strong.
Thanks. Have a great day.